Pakadosh Boker Tov Shavuot Tov Masechet Yevamot Daf Samechtet Amud Aleph 69a1. Says the Gemara, we were just mentioning about the entire concept of Rabbi Yochanan in the name of Rabbi Ishmael. He says that how do we know that a goy or an eved, a slave that has relations with a Jewish woman, or a Kohen Leviad shepesala that he disqualified her of eating truma, because it says in the pasuk in this week's parasha, ubat Kohen kuti almana grusha. We just read it in Parashat Emor, right? This was yesterday's daf, by the way. Ubat Kohen, the daughter of a Kohen, when she's going to be an almana grusha, v'shava right is then Shava she's going to go back. Somebody that has an almanut v'grusha. What does that mean? By a goy, there's no kiddushin, so therefore there doesn't exist the concept of almana grusha, of a widow or a divorced woman. But it's only a person that has almanut v'grushin ba yatsu. This concept does not have almanut v'grushin, and therefore it's going to prohibit her from eating teruma. So says the Gemara, Ashkechan Kohenet. This is only Kohenet. The pasuk says ubat Kohen. So we're talking about ubat Kohen, Kohenet. Leviya Yisraelit Menam. How do we know that this halacha also applies to a Leviya and a Yisraelit, right? To a Levite woman, and to an Israelite woman. So says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Abba Rav. It says Rabbi Abba Rav in the name of Rav, but ubat. It doesn't say bat Kohen kitieli. It says ubat Kohen with the extra vav. And what is that extra vav? So the extra vav is coming to teach you that since it's extra, superfluous, so therefore what? It's coming to include the Leviya and Israeli. Hachanami batuba. So to here, it's the same halacha that the extra vav is coming to teach you the entire concept that to do with the goy and Nebuchadnezzar having relations with them is also going to disqualify. So says the Gemara, Keman, who does this go like? Like Rabbi Akiva. Right? Remember that Rabbi Milbanes is a student of Rabbi Akiva. Right? Rabbi Akiva comes and he says, the Darish Vave. So means obviously this has to be going according to Rabbi Akiva. And according to Shtat Rabbi Akiva, we're going to be Doresh, the extra vavs. Meaning, many times in English, you could just add a big deal. No. Here he's being Doresh, even an extra vav. There's an extra vav. He's making a drasha, he's expounding upon it. So says the Gemara, no. Don't say it's Rabbi Akiva. Even if you're going to say that it's going according to the rabbi. Kula ubat krayiterahi. The entire pasuk is extra. How do we know the entire pasuk is extra? He says, because he says that since the pasuk beforehand already said bat kohen, it says ubat kohen kitieli zad. So therefore you didn't need to teach you the next pasuk, so therefore the entire pasuk about the bat kohen kitiel manu gusha was extra, and therefore since it was extra, that's why we're learning it. Because we're not learning it because of the vav, we're learning it because it's an extra pasuk. So therefore that's why it's an extra pasuk. That's why it's nothing to do with extra vav. No vav is extra. So therefore it could go even according to rabbis and not according to Rabbi Akiva. So ask the Gemara. So why don't we say Mish Yeshlo al menut vegerushin ba ki let lezera ka'achla ki itz lezera lo achla Mish en lo al menut vegerushin ba afal gavit lezera nami lo techul. So says the Gemara, one second. Why don't we change it up a little bit? Why don't we say that the kavanah of the pasuk is that if there's going to be kiddushin tofsim, which means kiddushin is chal, it actually penetrates, right? So mish yeshlo almanu begerushin ba. So dafka you could have kiddushin, which means that then you have also almanu begerushin, right? If a person gets married, so then she could become divorced or widowed, right? If there's no marriage, she'll never become divorced or widowed because she was never married. So he says, so kilet lezera kachla. So now when she doesn't have any children, then she's going to be kosher to eat truma. Ki eat lezera, but if she does have children, lo achla, she cannot eat truma. Which means only a woman that has a relationship, right, or is married to a man like this, then the zera en la b'shava betavia. She doesn't have children; she goes back to her father's house. A person that cannot have any kiddushin. So, for example, a goy or an eved, even if they do have children, she should still be able to go back to her father's house. Meaning, what we're trying to say is, what you always learn that obviously that the second that somebody cannot have kiddushin with her, for example, a goy or an eved, disqualifies her from eating truma completely. Then we were talking about does she have children? Does she have children? On a regular case. What's a regular case? She got married to somebody that's kosher to her. If she has children, she doesn't go back to her father's house to eat from there because now she has children. So she cannot eat the truma anymore. If she was a bat kohen, right, and she was married to an Israeli, right, an Israeli, regular Israeli, right. Now what happens is if she doesn't have children, she goes back to her father's house. Says the Gemara, no, maybe that's not the explanation. Maybe be'emet, if she gets married to the goy or to the eved, right, to the slave. So now, therefore, even if she's going to have children, she should still be able to go back and eat truma. Because it's only if she gets married to a regular person that has kiddushin, then it all depends whether she has children or doesn't have children. She has children, no more. She doesn't have children, she go back to her father's house. But if there's no kiddushin to see, so she doesn't have children, what do I care? She's going to have a child with a goy, or she's going to have a child with an heir. And then what's going to happen afterwards is what? Is that she's going to go and she's going to, how do you call it? She's going to be able to eat truma, going back to her father's house. So it says the Gemara, in Ken, if so, so why do I need then to add in the Leviyah and the Israelite? Which means, why do I need to add them in? Since the Pasuk is already teaching you about a Bat Kohen, which she in itself has Kedusha. So therefore, she's not going to be an Ifstelet, even though she does have a child from the Goy. So therefore, we're going to say Koshek and then the Leviyah and Israelite. All the more so then, obviously. There's the Gemara or Rabbi Akiva. Now remember that Rabbi Akiva, we learned this a few times in Yevamos. Rabbi Akiva has a special rule that Kiddushim are not going to be tofsim, even Chai Velav. If you remember, we paskin alachal masenolai for Akiva. For us, Kiddushim is not chal, only on kritut, on karet. But on a lav, it is chal. Okay? But according to Shitat Rabbi Akiva, even on a lav, it's not going to be chal. So for example, what's the difference? Let's say right now a Kohen gets married to a Grusha. It's a negative commandment. A Kohen Gadol gets married to an Almanah. It's a negative commandment. There's no written karet. So therefore, is it a good kiddushin or not? So according to Halacha L'Maaseh, it's a good kiddushin. Why? It's only Chayve Lavi. Chayve Lavi, it's a good kiddushin. You shouldn't do it, but if you did it, it's still a kiddushin. But there's no karet, because if there was karet, it's not chal. Meaning if somebody would come and give kiddushin to his sister, it's not chal. If you would give it to a Shomenet Yevamah, right? Yes, it will chal. Why? She's got a negative commandment. She can't get married to anybody else in the marketplace until she does Yibum. But if she did get married, it's a negative commandment. It's not karet, but certain women are karet. Okay? So he says, according to the Akiva Daman and Yushin Tosim Velavi. So then what does it mean now about going to Tieli Ishtar? Right? So he says the explanation is Kiti Ba'el, which means when she's going to have the relations. Okay, it's not going to be when she gets married, right? It's going to be when she has a relation. Because remember, according to the Akiva, she can't get married to somebody that has, right, that is disqualified to her. So Almanah Grusha, he said, why do I need Almanah Grusha? So he says, Almanah lachmir aleh, right? Almanah, to make it strict upon her, to prohibit her of eating truma when she has children. Ugrusha lakel aleh. So for the Grusha to be lenient on her. What do you mean to be lenient on her? So he says here to teach us, right, that if she goes back to her father's house if she didn't have any children. So therefore, we're being strict on the almanah if she does have children. We're being lenient on the grusha if she doesn't have children. So says the Gemara, utzricha, and you need both cases. Why do you need both cases? Diashmiran almanah, because if it was only going to be written almanahu dechilet lazera achla, only an almanah if she doesn't have children she can eat. Mishum dechazia lekiuna, because she's still fitting to the kiuna. Which means, remember that an almanah could get married to a kohen, right? Only to a kohen gadol, no, but to a regular kohen, an almanah could get married to a regular kohen. Aval grusha lo chaz lekuna, but a grusha cannot get married to a kohen. I would say that even if she doesn't have children, she can't eat. The iyashminan, therefore, we come to teach you know that she could eat, right? If she doesn't have children. The iyashminan grusha. Now, if it was only written by the grusha, so then I would say that by the grusha, if she has children, she's divorced, then she cannot eat. Why? Because remember, a grusha can never get married to a kohen. A divorced woman can never get married to a kohen. But an almanah, that she's always fitting to a kohen. I would say that even though she has children, she could eat. So tzricha, that's why we say that you need both of the psukim, almanah grusha, that she's not going to be eating. Okay? So says the Gemara, ve'ema nibala lepasulla af machzir grushato. So says the Gemara, what about when we're talking about now when she's nibala lepasulla? Nibala lepasulla means that she's going to have relations with somebody that's pasul to her. So af machzir grushato, so the same halacha will apply to machzir grushato. So says the Gemara, what does that mean? We know that if right now, right, the Torah is coming and prohibiting her, even if he's going to be machzir grushato when she gets married to somebody else, because since the Ba'alah Rishon was a zah, right, so therefore it's an isur lav. So therefore, right now she's going to come and he's going to have a relation with her again, right? It should actually disqualify her because it says ubat kohen k'tiel yizar he bitrumat kodashim tochel. She shouldn't get married to. She shouldn't eat the trumat kodashim. So answers the Gemara leish zar b'nismana misha yazar etzla meikara lapuke hay delo zar etzla meikara, which means like this. Remember, like right now, that a person gets married. When he gets married, mazal tov, chazak u'baruch. He comes and he gets divorced. Yeah, okay, fine. So he gets divorced. When he gets divorced, he has a mitzvah lachzir grushato. There's a mitzvah to take back his grusha, which means that even though he divorced her, his mitzvah take her back, no problem. What happens if she gets married to somebody else? Now that's it. That's it, kaddish. The second she gets married to somebody else, she's not take it back. Yeah? No. Marriage. Has to be marriage. So here it says, what happens now, right, if after she got married to somebody else, he took her back. Now he wasn't allowed to, but he took her back. So does he now disqualify her from the truma completely or not? So we would have thought, yes. Why? The pasuk says, so now that she's coming and going with this zara again, come on. Says the Gemara, no. When it says liish zara, when it says liish zara, it means that he was always a stranger from her. This comes to exclude this case because he wasn't always a stranger. He knew her very well. He was married to her. He got divorced from her, and then she got married to somebody else, and then she came back and he took her back again. But he's not an Izan, right? He knows her. So if it's not an Izan, Izan means that from the beginning it's an Izan. Okay, so ask the Gemara, if so, halal, the love that it's love you, loli so. So he says, one second, if you're going to tell me then the Mekor Din, that abiyat psul is poselota, which means that if somebody that's prohibited has relations with her, he disqualifies her from eating truma. So what about a halal? A halal is not a zah, right, to do with this woman. However, though, it shouldn't disqualify her. We know that it does. Meaning like this, a kohen gets married to a grusha, and he has a child. That child is called a halal. A kohen gets married to a goya, or no, that's anyway, that's a goy. A kohen gets married to a grusha, right, or to a chalutza, right? In these cases, the child becomes a halal. So now, if right now the child becomes a halal, right? So now what happens is that this halal, if they have relations with the woman, he disqualifies her from eating truma. So imagine, you have this kohen, got married to grusha. Then the child comes, a boy. He goes with the girl. Now this girl was a true bat kohen. She was a bat Yisrael, but bat kohen. She was daughter of a kohen. Yeah? That's it. The second that this halal has relations with her, disqualified from eating truma. So says the Gemara, if you're going to tell me now that it's somebody that's not a zar mikara, not a zar mikara means that it wasn't a stranger from the beginning. This halal, right, the love zar it's not mikara, wasn't a halal mikara. Because in shum isur virat halal kshera, right, he comes and he says, it shouldn't disqualify. So for now, if he's going to come and he's going to get married to her, he shouldn't prohibit her. So Amarka, the pasuk says no. Why? The pasuk says "Velo yechalel zaro be'amav," that you should not disqualify. This is talking about the yisur of a kohen gadol taking an almanah. Remember, kohen gadol cannot be married to an almanah. The kohen idiot, yes. The kohen gadol, no. So he says, "Lo yechalel zaro be'amav." What does it mean? You do not want the children are going to become halalim. So when it says zaro is written by the zera, and zaro is talking about by the father. So therefore, makish zaro lo. Tzaykesh for his children to him. Mahu, just like the Kohen Gadol, he's going to be posel the almanah from eating truma. Meaning if a Kohen Gadol goes and lives with an almanah, That's it. She can never eat truma again.
Not only that, she can't marry regular
In
kohen.
a regular kohen, she's disqualified. After also to his children, which are halalim, nami posel disqualifies them from eating truma. So therefore, it's a special isur, even though there's no isur in her, but there's a special isur by the zar'o, that the children of halalim, that they are halalim, they cannot eat truma. So says the Gemara, the ima mishat havaya. Says 1 second. Why don't we say that that's only going to be during the time of kiddushin, even before the relations, right? Because when it says kitiyeh is always kiddushin. Kitiyeh, you take a kiddushin, you take a marriage. Remember that in kiddushin, there's 2 steps. There's the first step of marriage, which is giving over the ring, which is kiddushin. And then there's the nisuin, which is the actual marriage where they actually live together. So the living together is the second process. So ask the Gemara, why do we say that it only happens once he has relations with her? Even the kiddushin in itself should already be enough, that it's already too much. The second there's kiddushin, disqualifies her. So answers the Gemara, Dunya de Kohen Gadol Balmana. It's like a Kohen Gadol Balmana. Ma Kohen Gadol Balmana bebiyah. Just like by a Kohen Gadol that goes with an almana, it's only the biyah which is posel, which means only the relations disqualifies. So to here, it's only the relations which is going to disqualify, and it's not going to be the actual kiddushin. Meaning, if he did kiddushin and then he actually did teshuvah and he got divorced from her, whatever it is, he does not disqualify her. Right? Why? Because there was no biyah. There has to be a relation. The relation disqualifies, and not the actual kiddushin disqualifies. So says the Gemara, "Ve'ima ad deika v'ya ubiyah." Says the Gemara, let me go the other way around. I told you that it should be disqualified before the biyah from the time of kiddushin. So why don't I just say that it has to be both? Which means that you have to have kiddushin plus biyah, right? Because we just said that the biyah prohibits even without the kiddushin. Meaning relations prohibits without the kiddushin, but kiddushin is not prohibit. You need the biyah. So he says, why don't we need both? So he says, Dunya the Kohen Gadol Balmana, just like the Kohen Gadol Balmana, biyah by itself, even without kiddushin, it's enough to disqualify her. So to here, Hainami biyah, it's going to be lechuda, it's going to be enough to disqualify her, even though there's no kiddushin. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yosef says, Kol shezar'o pasul posel. Any time where the zar'o is pasul, it's posel. Kol she'en zar'o pasul, eno posel. But if the children are not pasul, so that they do not posel, which means if the child is pasul, so therefore, which means that he becomes disqualified, so he could disqualify other people. If the child is not pasul, so he does not disqualify other people. What's the nafkamina there between Tanakama and Rabbi Yosef? This sentence, obviously, there has to be something that there's a difference between what he just said and what the Tanakama said. Some Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan, Mitzri Sheni v'Adami Sheni Kavanai. Very simple. Mitzri Sheni. Remember that it says in the Torah that until Dor Shelishi, the third generation, a Mitzri or an Adoni cannot come into a Kal Kadosh. Right? They cannot get married into the Kal. So what happens? You have a Mitzri, an Egyptian, they convert. So for the first generation, they can't get married to a Jew. They can only get married to somebody like them. Right? Exactly. Dor Shelishi. So now what happens? You have a Rishon getting married to a Rishon, which means a Mitzri boy and a Mitzri girl. Right? Rishon and Rishon, they get married. Their child is now Mitzri Sheni. Right? And then Mitzri Shlishi. If they get married to another one, let's say a Mitzri Sheni to a Mitzri Rishon, that means he's already second generation Mitzri converted, but she's only so there's a whole question. Do you go after the man? Do you go after the woman? But okay. Now let's say that everything was aligned. So Mitzri Rishon with the Rishon, they had a Sheni. Mitzri Sheni with a Sheni, now they're going to have a Shlishi. He does not disqualify the child because the child can come into the Kal, but he himself is Pasul. You understood? So that's what we just said. Mitzri Sheni v'Adomi Sheni ki benayu. What is that? The difference is that you have the second generation of Gerim, of Mitzrim and Adomi, right? If they are going to be postel the woman, right? Why? Right? Let's say that they were, let's say, Mitzri Rishon or Beli Rishon, or they're not allowed to come to the Kal, or Mitzri Sheni, Adomi Sheni. But the Shlishi is permitted. So Tanakama holds that Stam Mitzri v'Adomi is postel anisha bebiatam, which means it disqualifies a woman with relations. Which means that he says that anybody that's a sur to come to the kahal, they prohibit a woman with their relation. According to Rabbi Yosef, no. Only if their children will become disqualified. So if their children do not become disqualified, they do not prohibit a woman by having relations with her. Okay, until you're clear? Says the Gemara, Ushnehem lo lamdua, ela mi kohen gadol be'almana. And they both learned it from the Kohen Gadol to Almana. Why? Tana Kama Savar Tana Kama holds, right? Ma Kohen Gadol Almana, just like a Kohen Gadol Almana, Bia to Avira, that is Bia is going to be an Avira, Uposel, and it disqualifies her, meaning an Almana is not allowed to get married to a Kohen Gadol. Plus, he disqualifies her when he has relations with her. Afainami, so to here, Posel, it's going to disqualify. The fact that he has relations with her, it's going to disqualify. But Rabbi Yosef Savar, Rabbi Yosef holds no, like a Kohen Gadol. Just like a Kohen Gadol, his son, or his pasul, Uposel. His children, meaning like this, they both learn from the Kohen Gadol, but what are we focusing on? Are we focusing on the children? That's Rabbi Yosef. So he says that just like the children are going to be disqualified, so too he could disqualify the woman. So too any time that the children are going to be disqualified, he could disqualify the woman. Right? Which comes to exclude that his children are not disqualified. Because it says, third generation, they're allowed to come into Kal Hashem. So are we focusing by the Kohen Gadol on his children? Or are we focusing on the Kohen Gadol that he disqualifies the woman with his relations? If you say that you're focusing on the disqualifying with the relations, I don't care about the children. So therefore, even by a mitzri and everything, he's posel. Why? His bia is posel. But if you're going to tell me that you're looking by the Kohen Gadol about the children, so for Dor Shlishi, it's not posel. So for if this mitzri sheni comes and has relations with a regular woman, he doesn't disqualify. Okay? So my ika ben Rabbi Yosef le Rashba. What's the difference between Rabbi Yosef and Rishon Gamliel? So he says, Amarula says, Ger Amoni Moavi, a Ger Amoni Moavi. Why? We know that a Ger Amoni Moavi, they prohibit a woman with their relations. Okay? Them, their children, children's children, and you continue until all of generations. Remember, in Ammon and Moab, the men are prohibited forever. It's only the women which are permitted because they don't go out to war, and that was the entire question of David Amelech, right, with Ruth. Okay, but so he says, the Biosek comes and he says, as long as the children are pasul, he disqualifies. So for Ammoni and Moavi, the children are pasul, so they're always going to be pasul. But according to Rashbad, he says only a psulim, they come and they are posela women. Ammoni and Moavi, right, the women are psulim, so therefore they don't disqualify the woman with the bia, with the relations. Ushneim lo lamdu, they both learn it from a Kohen Gadol from Almana. The Biosef, Savar Biosef says, just like by the Kohen Gadol Almana, the children are pasul, so she's going to be posel. So too, as long as the children are pasul, it's going to be posel. So therefore, that's why it's going to be posel also in this case of the women. However, the Rashbam says, the Kohen Gadol Almana, shekol zaro pasul, all the children are going to be pasul, uposel. So too, kol zaro pasul posel, it comes to exclude an Ammoni Moavi, because it's not kol zaro pasul, because it says more Ammoni lo Ammoni, the girls are always permitted. So since the girls are always permitted, it's not all the children are prohibited. So because it's not all the children are going to be prohibited, so therefore that's why he's going to come and he's going to permit that it does not disqualify a woman, right? Because this woman could give birth, and it does not disqualify all of these women. It's a Mishnah. Somebody that has relation to the woman because he violated her, he seduced her, or a shoteh that gets married to a woman. Lo poslim velo ma'achlim. He does not posel ota from eating truma. Let's say if he's a Yisrael and she's a bat Kohen, he doesn't disqualify her from eating truma, but he doesn't give her to eat truma. So therefore, let's say somebody comes and violates the daughter of a Kohen, she could still continue eating the truma. He seduced her. He could still continue. She could still continue. Your country. Doesn't matter, right? Doesn't matter. She continues eating truma. But let's say he got married to her. Let's say it's a shoteh, right? You're right. I mean, she could still eat truma, right? But he doesn't give her to eat. So means if he's the Kohen, he's the shoteh, but he's the Kohen, and he now gets married to this bat Yisrael, he doesn't give her because there's no kinyan, there's no acquisition. He's a shoteh. If they cannot come into Israel, then it's basically the honest and the pater or the shoteh. One of these three is the mamzer, the person that violated was one of these disqualified people. So they do prohibit the bat Kohen, right, with the relations from eating truma. Ketzad, what's the case? So now we're going to explain the case. A regular Jew has relations with the bat Kohen, whether it was that he forced her, violated her, or seduced her. She could still eat truma. Why? He himself is kosher. He violated her. He seduced her. But again, she's still able to eat truma. 69b. Yes, 69b. Ibra, when she became pregnant. Lo tochal b'truma. She cannot eat truma. Why? Because now the fact that she has a child from Israel, that does disqualify her from eating truma. What happens if exactly. It was very. How do you say? It was very good for her, but it was very. Right. It just happened to be that all of a sudden now the child was cut up in her stomach, which means right. But I mean, she still didn't. Yeah, something like that. So it says here, tochal, she can still eat truma. Okay. That's a lot of meat. Says the Gemara. So one more time, the Mishnah says that if she became pregnant, she doesn't eat truma because she has a child. If the child became abortion, whatever it is, even though it's still inside of her stomach, but it became all cut up, so she's allowed to eat. Harek when shibal bat Israel. Now we have another case. A kohen has relations with the bat Israel, whether he seduced her or he violated. Lo tocha b'truma. She can't eat truma. Because she went with the kohen, now she can eat truma. Obviously not. Ibrat, she becomes pregnant, still she can't have eating. Yalda, now she gives birth to a kohen, now she can eat truma. So here you see that the child has more strength than the father. Because the father, by having relations with her, didn't make her eat truma. But the second that she has a child, now she could eat the truma. So the power of the child supersedes the power of the father. Ha'eved, posel mishum biyah. An eved Kanaani prohibits a kohenet from eating truma because of his relations. Ve'eno posel mishum zera. It is not prohibit because of a zera, right? Because of Israel. Which means that if she gets married, if a kohenet gets married to a regular Israel kasher and then he dies, and they have a child, right, which is an eved Kanaani, we don't say that since he has a child, she cannot go back to Bet Aviyah. Because an eved Kanaani is not considered zera shalem. It's not considered a child. Okay? Kate said, what's the case? Bat Israel, a kohen, if it's a bat Israel that gets married to a kohen, or a bat kohen to Israel, he has a child. And then this child goes, and he goes with a shivcha Kanaani. And has a child. Right? But remember, basically, if the child goes with a shivcha Kanaani, right? The child is a goyas. Therefore, the child is a Kanaani. Hayta emaviv bat Israel. If the mother of the father was a bat Israel, a kohen, lo tochal b'truma shekanani truma. But kohen Israel tochal b'truma. If it's a bat kohen to Israel, she could eat truma. But remember, she's a bat kohen. So since she's a bat kohen, she could get married, right? She could go back because the husband dies, and now, right, the child also. So now she doesn't have any children, right? Only the child from the Eved. So it's not a child. So for tochal b'truma, she could eat truma. Okay, next. Now we're talking about mamzer. So mamzer posel u'ma'achil. A mamzer does disqualify, but he's able to give truma. What's the concept? Ketzad. Bat Yisrael a kohen or bat kohen Yisrael. Doesn't matter whether it's a bat kohen Yisrael to a kohen or bat kohen Yisrael. Yalda menu bat. He has a girl. Balcha bat. The bat goes when she gets married. Whether it's to an eved or a nechliv. Yalda menu ben. And has a child. Harez mamzer. Okay, so this is obviously going according to the opinion that if a goy goes with a woman, the child is a Jewish woman, if the child is a mamzer, right? That's what it says here. Right, exactly. So the child is a mamzer. Hayta imo bat Yisrael kohen, but if right now imo, the mother is going to be a bat Yisrael to a kohen, and now the husband dies and the daughter, and now it's only the child, which is the mamzer. Tochal b'truma, she can eat truma because since she has zera from the kohen, so she can eat truma. Right, but kohen Yisrael, but kohen to Yisrael, lo tochal b'truma, she cannot eat truma. Why? Because once she has child from the Israel, she cannot eat truma, even though the child is a mamzer. Next, kohen gadol. Pe'amim shu posel. Sometimes it's going to disqualify. Ketzad, what's the case? Right? But kohen Yisrael v'yalda menu bat. When you have a bat kohen to Yisrael and she has a daughter, ve'alcha bat v'niset lekohen v'yalda menu ben. Now the bat goes and she gets married to a kohen, v'yalda menu ben. And then he's going to have a child. So this is fitting to be a kohen gadol, which is omed u'mishamesh al gavei mizbeach, right? Which means, think about what happened here. You have a bat kohen gets married to Yisrael. They have a daughter. The daughter goes and gets married to a kohen, and now he has a child. Everything was kosher. Remember, bat kohen to Yisrael. You could have any case. Bat kohen Yisrael mutar. They have a child. Now, what child? They had a daughter. Now, this daughter, she could get married to a kohen, right? She gets married to a kohen. She has a son. That son could be a kohen gadol, right? Well, there's no problem. So he comes and he says she got married to a kohen. Ma'achiletimo, he's going to give to his mother truma. Uposel enimo, but he's going to disqualify the grandmother, right? Zotomeret, which means to say lo kibni a kohen gadol shu poseli min truma, right? Which means don't be like my ben beni, which is the son of my son, right? The kohen gadol, because he's going to disqualify me from eating truma, which means noach la zera pasul ma'achila betruma from zera shu kohen, right, which is a kasher, which is going to come, right, and posel otam from truma. Okay, fine. Says the Gemara. Okay, now we're on the Gemara on Masechet Yevamot. Says the Gemara, Tadina lehat tan Rabbanan. So we learned in Mishnah which we learned in the Braita, shote vekatan shenasu nashim vemetu. Imagine right now you have a shote vekatan that gets married, and what happens is they die without children. So the shoteim pturo milechalitza yibum. You don't have to yibum b'chalitza. Why? It's not a good marriage. It's not a viable marriage, right? A marriage has to be not with a shote, not with a katan. A katan, a minor, cannot acquire anything. So for there's no marriage. A shote can never acquire anything. So there's no marriage. So for even though they got married to a woman and then they die, Kaddish, they don't need Yibum Chalitza. There's nothing there. Okay? Fine. Next. Ketzad. We said, what was the case? If a Yisrael has relations with a Bat Kohen, she could still eat Truma. But if she becomes pregnant, then she cannot eat Truma. So says the Gemara, given the Abra, once she becomes pregnant, Lo Tochal, she does not eat because of the fetus. Lechu Shema Ibra. What do we suspect from the beginning? That she already became pregnant. Meaning we're only saying if she's already pregnant, so don't eat. Why don't we suspect that the second that he had relations with her, she's already pregnant? So Milo Tran, did we learn? We already learned that when you have two women, you remember we learned this case. You remember that we spoke about the two women that they got married and then they got switched with the husband. So we don't know now. So what do we say? We check them out for 3 months to make sure that they're not pregnant, because if not, then the children are going to be mamzerim. So he says, so Amar Rav Huna liyuchasin chashashu litruma lo chashu. There's genealogy. There we want to know who's the son of who. So for that, we're going to separate them to make sure that they weren't pregnant. We're going to separate them for 3 months. But for truma, we don't suspect. So that means here we're only talking about eating truma. We're not suspecting that maybe she's pregnant. So we're not going to come and separate her and start saying in 3 months, is she pregnant, not pregnant? Let her eat truma. There's no problem. Okay? So says the Gemara, they never suspected the truma. Imagine a husband comes and tells the wife, now the husband is Kohen, she's a Bat Yisrael, okay? So now, until now, she's married, so she's allowed to eat truma. He comes and he tells his wife, this is your get on condition 1 hour before his death. Meaning 1 hour before his death, whenever that death happens, she becomes divorced. Now we know she's divorced. Is she allowed to eat truma? No. Yeah? So therefore the question is, now she's assumed to eat truma immediately. Why? We're going to suspect maybe he's going to die immediately. If he dies immediately, that's it, she's not allowed to eat truma. So says the Gemara, says Rabbi Baravuna, benesuin chashashu. When women are married and then they went and they separated, I mean not separated, they got mixed up because they thought that they were having relations with their husbands. There we suspected that maybe from one biyah, right, since they didn't want to stop from having a child, they thought they wanted to become pregnant. They thought it was with their husbands. So for they were not going to do anything to stop becoming pregnant. But by znut, lo chashashu, right, we're not going to come and we're not going to suspect. Why? A woman that's violated or that she's, how do you call it, seduced,
she could do this.
she's going to try to stop becoming pregnant. Meaning even after the relations, she'll take a pill, she'll take a liquid, she'll do whatever it is, she'll do anything. She's allowed. Yeah, of course. In this case, for sure. If she's seduced and she's the thing, yeah, she'll do something. Which means, no, we're not talking about that. So that's what the Gemara is saying, that to do with the concept of their husbands, they didn't do anything to stop it because they thought they were having relations with their husbands. So since they thought that they were having relations with their husbands, they thought, okay, fine, there's no problem. Here, though, right, we actually thought this. So he says over here, that means they know what's znut. No, they're not going to become pregnant. So says the Gemara, but when she said Yisrael met, imagine right now a Bat Kohen gets married to Yisrael and he dies. He died on the same day of the wedding, right? She could do tevilah, right? And she eats. So we're not going to suspect then that she became pregnant the first biyah. So Rav Chasta says no. She does tevilah and she eats until the 40 days. Because she didn't become pregnant. She's not going to become pregnant. She does become pregnant. Until 40 days, it's considered water. It's mayim be'alma. It's not considered ubar. And therefore, since it's not considered a fetus, it does not prohibit in Truma. After 40 days, it does. So that's the Gemara. It says, Yachi, so, Ema Seifa, let's say the Seifa. One second. What happens now if all of a sudden now you do see the uba? You see the fetus in her stomach. So now she's going to be mekukele levafreya, which means she has to pay back all the truma that she ate. Plus a fifth. That's called like any case. Meaning that if a person comes and they eat truma, they're not allowed to eat truma. We learned it also in this week's parasha. You have to add on an extra fifth.
Wow.
Right? We just read it yesterday. Richard, open the parasha again and look it up, please. Right? Don't tell me that you don't remember. Look it up. Right? We just learned that if a person comes and they ate from truma that they were not supposed to eat, they have to pay back the keren, the principal, plus an extra fifth. What? What does it mean? Until 40 days. Itmar, it was stated about it. Imagine right now you have a person has relations with his wife in the house of his father, which means that it was a real marriage. Remember, arusa means that it was already kiddushin. He gave her the ring. It's not just nowadays engagement that also after 5 minutes, he could dump her, she could dump him, and they go to somebody else. A real marriage. But he had relations with her in the house of, chamim, which means that they didn't have this swing yet. Rav says, it says, the child is a mamzer. Shmuel, a man of blood, shtuki. Says Shmuel, the child is a shtuki. What's a shtuki? Because basically it's a safek, we don't know what it is. Safek mamzer. That means even though they both say that they had the relations and everything, we say that since she was prutza and she went and she had relations with the boyfriend, so we're going to, not the boyfriend, it's really the husband, but we're going to suspect that she's having relations with other people as well. Mm-hmm. So
is she married or just married?
No, she's married, but the marriage of the Torah, there's kiddushin and nisuin. Kiddushin is the wedding ring, the ring, but then there's nisuin is taking her into the chuppah. They're not allowed to have relations until the real wedding, which is nisuin, right? Until after the chuppah. But here they did have relations in between the first stage and second. It's not like the engagement of today. That's why I said it's not engagement of today. The engagement of today is worth nothing. Right? There's nothing there. Talking about the mamash marriage, but they went too early.
Like a year interval?
Yes, it was a year.
But it's there that it's done like
the Gemara. So now says the Gemara, Rav says the child is mamzer, Shmuel says the blood is a shtuki. Why? Because if the fact that she could come and have relations with this husband, maybe she's not get it to everybody. Because remember, for her it's something new, it's something exciting. So just like she went and she did it, okay, so she could do it with everybody. And then all of a sudden it'll be the blood, it's gonna be a shtuki. We don't know who the father is. So Amar Rav says, it's actually very logical that what Rav said. The daima me alma. So he says, but she's going to be suspected for other men. She's not going to be suspected for other men. So we're going to say that it's probably from him. So Amar Rav comes and he says, how do we know this? Tiktani was we said, if she has a child, tochal, she could eat. Because we're going to say that it comes from the Kohen. What's the case that if she has a child, she could eat? You're going to say that she's suspected from other men. So that why, if she has a child, can she eat? Maybe it came from a regular Israel. It wasn't from the husband, which is a Kohen. Elalav, but rather, we're suspecting it coming from the husband, but not from anybody else. And just like over there, this full nisur for everybody, which means there was an nisur for the Kohen, there was an nisur for everybody to be with her. Because at the end of the day, to be with a Pnuya, right? You're not allowed to be with a girl, right? Besides the fact of Nida, which is all itself and it's already wrong. Because all the girls are Nida. Until they get married and they don't do the mikveh properly and so on and so forth, right? It's always a nidas. So from anyway, there's going to be karet, there's going to be all the other problems. You understand? But he says, what are you going to do here? But here, there was an isur for him and an isur for her. Look, koshikin is not going to be a koshikin. At the end of the day, he could justify himself. He could say, listen, at the end of the day, for me, I'm getting married to her. So, I have a that, she's going to be my wife. So you could say this. So, Amaleh Abaya says, no. Really, I'm going to tell you, even though it's going to be that she's chashuda from the arus, even if she's not chashuda from other men, Rav still says the blood is mamzer. Now, why? It's probably from the husband. So he says, no, my time what's reasoning. We say that just like she went and she made herself a kid to her boyfriend, to her arus, to her husband, she made herself a kid, right? I don't want to use husband because it is a husband. It is a husband, but it's in the middle. In a sense, it's a fiance. It's much.
It makes more sense if
there's rumors. That's one thing.
Right. No. Obviously, she's pregnant. What do you mean? You don't need rumors. Her stomach is in between her teeth.
No,
And she has a child.
Rumors that she was playing around.
Ah, fine. Okay, that's fine.
Is there a reason why girls?
In our Mishnah, we're talking about the both of them were going to be in the jail. Okay, what does that mean? That means that there was nobody else other than them. They put them both in the same jail cell. So we already know that they were both in jail, right? We're not going to suspect that now maybe the one in charge of the jail, right? The jail guard or whatever is going to start, fooling around with that. It was probably the husband and the wife. They were both in the same jail, right? The jail cell. So he says, some people say, if he had relations with her, no. If he has relations and he's more dead than he has relations, means he admits that he had relations with her, everybody says that it goes after the husband, meaning the fiance. This is what it says. Rav says that the child is a mamzer vadai, because if right now we don't know if it's from the Arutz or somebody else, then we say that it goes after the majority of the world and it's a vadai. But Shmuel says it's a fake mamzer. But if the husband admits that it was from him, we take it for granted. We say yes, we believe. Okay, Amarav says mistabra milta de Rav. It's also mistaber that which Rav says the lo daima mina that we're not going to suspect from other people. So that means that from him, because he's not saying the diamond in Alma. Then we're going to say that it's coming from the world, which means that if it's coming from the world, we're going to suspect it. Aval daimon mina aina mudalet, right? 78 one. Aval daimon mina, but if it's chashuda that it comes from the fiance, after the diamond in Alma, even though she's also suspected of other people, we're going to throw it after him. We're going to say it probably came from him and not from other people. Have a wonderful